tell you, it is good to be in this congregation's pulpit again. I've led several worship services at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Lehigh Valley over these years. Happily, this morning I see new faces. So first to introduce or to remind, hi, I'm Bryant. I retired Unitarian Universalist minister. Now I'm going to be careful what I say today. I don't want to get anybody else in trouble. Since this service is being shared over the internet, I want to be clear that what I'm speaking for myself. I do not speak for any other person, nor for any organization. I'm amazed I feel the need to say that. In many instances in my life, I have peacefully petitioned my government for redress of grievances. The U.S. Constitution says that's my right. At this time in our history, and particularly as a Unitarian Universalist, I'm not so sure. News sources tell me that 2 months ago, a federal court in Fort Worth, Texas, sentenced 8 persons who had been protesters at an ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The 8 now convicts were protesters at an ICE facility. Their prison terms are from 30 to 100 years. Our Justice Department characterizes their actions as a terrorist attack. The 8 our DOJ chose to label terrorists and impose the most extreme sentences. Also in the news, I learned that this past June, 15 people in Minnesota were charged as part of a conspiracy against ICE for trying to block arrest and deportation of immigrants. I bring you related news update from just this past Sunday. This from the First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. The Reverend Jen Crow delivered the news. Recent court filings, she said, revealed that U.S. Department of Homeland Security agents had spied on churches, including First Universalist, as part of a broader investigation into activists opposing the work of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. She said our spiritual practice grounds us in that work. The Reverend Crow's announcement referred to documents which are part of a government court filing, seeming to indicate that DHS may have violated a court injunction. The injunction bars warrantless investigations on the property of some churches, except in exigent circumstances. The Unitarian Universalist Association has joined 10 other faith groups in challenging DHS's anti-immigrant actions this year, including the arrest of those 15 protesters in Minnesota. The UUA, in sharply worded press release, notes that as members of a religion, Unitarian Universalists are guaranteed the right to freely exercise our faith. We have grave concerns over the unconstitutional infiltration of homes of worship and will fight against this infringement on our rights. Most of my life, I have believed I live in a country where its Constitution guaranteed me rights, including speech, religion, assembly, and to peacefully petition my government for redress of grievance. In fact, the First Amendment of our Constitution specifically prohibits Congress from making laws which abridge my and your rights of assembly and petition. By the way, the First Amendment also protects freedom of religion and prohibits Congress interference with that. Now, for about 10 years, I lived in a country where it is illegal to be a member of a Nazi organization, to give a Nazi salute, display a swastika or other Nazi symbols. Now, I know that doesn't sound very democratic. The country is Germany. I don't need to tell you that Germans know from bitter experience about fascism's terrors, hence their strict anti-fascist laws. Well, so far now I've rambled on about rights associated with the American Constitution and not so democratic laws in another country. Well, This past September, our president issued a memorandum titled Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. Last I checked, there is no law passed by our Congress concerning domestic terrorism. Helpfully, the president's memo defines a potential domestic terrorist as anyone expressing anti-American, anti-Christian, or anti-capitalism views, beliefs, opinions, standpoints, thoughts, not actions. Got it? A potential domestic terrorist is anyone expressing views which can be construed as anti-American, anti-Christian, or anti-capitalism. Which is why I bring it up here, and why I emphasize that I'm speaking in the first person singular. I am not anti-American. Seems like a category open to many possible and very subjective, very personal interpretations. I have both praised and criticized this country and still do, and likely will want to continue. I've demonstrated, and I've signed petitions and written and spoken my opinions in a multitude of situations and venues. My representatives in various levels of government have seen me, and if they chose to, have heard and read my views and their actions and policies. And actually, living outside the United States has given me a greater appreciation of what this country has accomplished in its 250 years. In such matters as civil rights, women's rights, workers' rights, immigrants' rights, LGBTQ+ rights. And I know they're all under attack, are being watered down and whittled down and ignored here these days. I gag at speeches like those heard at recent national celebrations with their rosy rhetoric implying that we, in the greatest country on earth, have already accomplished that more perfect union, aspired to in the preamble of the aforementioned Constitution. In my life, it has felt and feels like this nation has made progress we can build upon, restore, and enlarge upon. There's lots to do. As always, I am hopeful. I am not anti-American. As a UU, I am not anti anybody's religion. As a person who grew up attending a variety of Christian denomination services, as a Unitarian Universalist minister who graduated from a Christian seminary and tries to serve the assortment of faiths encountered as a hospital chaplain and in UU congregations, I have studied, learned, discussed, experienced, and questioned numerous religious doctrines. Some of them do not coincide with those beliefs my faith invites, encourages, and welcomes me to choose. In some cases, others' articles of faith outright reject mine and me. So be it. As Popeye taught me to say, I am what I am. As an outcome of that studying, learning, discussing, experiencing, and questioning, and listening, I've come to appreciate the genuine, visible value of the world's religions, plural. All the value they have in people's lives, the importance they can have in influencing and determining how people live with others, for good and bad. No, I'm not against Christianity or any other faith I know of. Likewise, I'm not anti-capitalism. I frequently criticize and oppose some of how that economic system is practiced in this country and in others. I've read Adam Smith. I've lived in another very capitalistic country with a vibrant and generous economy, and have short-term experience in others. I've seen everyone in those places having nearly universal health care, the homeless being helped and housed, labor unions protected by law and those laws enforced. There's child care and elder care as a right. Immigrants admitted, housed, and protected. Hundreds of thousands of refugees and immigrants. I've seen it and experienced that. It seems to me that what's commonly labeled capitalism here is probably what one of my colleagues, Alicia Hauser of the UU's Church of the Larger Fellowship, she calls them violent extractive capitalism. That there is one group that is entitled to own resources and distribute those resources based on who is deemed worthy. Labels can be deliberately confusing and misleading. The as practiced sometimes, and in some places, remarkably far from as envisioned. And it's not only being accused of holding those anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-capitalism views that can get me into trouble, get me labeled a domestic terrorist. So can my opinions if they seem to include, and here I quote the president, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. These, he writes, are animating violent conduct. Imagine that some may find my views on immigration, race, and gender extreme. Do I, as a Unitarian Universalist, hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality? Should I have to concern myself with that question? Should my government? The President's memo I've been sharing with you, its full title again, if you want to look it up on the White House website, is Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. And I know I've been belaboring the President's memorandum. That's because it is, right now, being used to justify much of what we see, hear, and read as news in this country. And it seems to intend to have effects on my UU faith and that of others. I look around this congregation and I'm pleased and proud to say I see and remember faces of folks I've been with at demonstrations and marches and protests recently and over the years, supporting women's rights and civil rights and LGBTQ plus rights and workers' rights and voters' rights and universal health care and a bunch more. We've been opposing wars and poverty and homelessness and so many other issues, which people in a democracy should have a voice in. To me, that's being a small d Democrat, not a terrorist. Yes, sometimes I'm alone. Sometimes I'm with a few 100,000 of my closest friends. So what am I to do when threatened for my deeply held beliefs? Be scared? Turn off the news? Do nothing? If you read through Unitarian Universalist history, you find that raising our voices and being there first and taking action to support religious principles is what UUs are about. The positions my faith calls on me to support are not always the most popular. And I think that just might be exactly why they need to be raised to the public consciousness and conscience and be supported. Sometimes I think I have to listen to Martin Niemöller and ask myself, if I don't speak up, who will? So be it, and amen.